You comfortable? Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah, I can't believe it either. I'm just as speechless as you are, and you're an inanimate object, and that's saying something. I'm sorry for how much I've beat you up over the last couple of weeks. It's okay. The next 2 weeks aren't going to be much better. Because we're in the cup final! Yeah. Yeah, that happened. Yeah. There was a moment there where I wasn't quite sure. Losing game 4 and game 5 of the Western Conference Final had me a little bit concerned that we'd be the 48th team to have a 3-0 series lead and the first team ever to blow it. And the 5th team in NHL history to blow a series up 3-0 in any situation. Joining, the Sharks and whoever else has done it, if I remember. But it's behind us, and now we're 4 wins away from our first Stanley Cup in franchise history with home ice advantage against the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, who have somehow managed to catch lightning in a bottle this postseason. There are so many storylines here, and I don't even really know where to begin because there's so much to cover. Ultimately, I'm just going to start like I've done the previous 3 series previews. And yeah, I can't believe I'm saying I've done 3 of these series previews before this one. If you'd have told me, at the beginning of this journey, whenever I started making these videos, that, you get to commentate over a Stanley Cup final, I'd be like, holy moly, you're kidding. But here we are. I get to break down a Stanley Cup final matchup. Golden Knights, Florida Panthers. Where do I start? You start talking about the road team because that's where you've started every other time. Really? You didn't think I was going to do that again? Shame on you. Of course, we're going to start with the road team in this series, the team that I don't follow very much until I have to follow their every waking move because they're about to play the most consequential series of any single year in the Florida Panthers. And obviously, we're going to start off with the Florida Panthers' biggest playoff controversy. Whatever this is, why? Why are the patches like this? I don't understand. It always goes here, and I know the Golden Knights are going to likely have the same problem with their Circa patch, and I haven't seen their mock-ups yet, and I may be eating my words. But why did you put it there? But anyway, jerseys aside, let's talk about what the Florida Panthers have done, the way they've gotten here, and the players that are likely going to have the biggest impact on the Stanley Cup final. Obviously, we have to start with their amazing comeback from down 3-1 versus the best regular season team ever in the Boston Bruins, capped off by a major Linus Ullmark dang it in Game 5 that handed the Panthers that one, and then Game 6, and then blowing a lead in the last minute of Game 7 to force overtime, and then having Verhaeghe end the Boston Bruins season. And then, of course, how can anybody forget they go up 3-0 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, having just won their first playoff series in 19 years. So, yeah. I mean, the Panthers had just ended a drought of their own the year prior, having not won a series since they got all the way to the Stanley Cup final in 1996. And then goodness knows how many years until 2022 when they lost in the second round to the Tampa Bay Lightning. But anyway, they take care of the Leafs in 5 games, and then they play 4 one-goal games, even though if you count the amount of time they played 5.5 hockey games, winning by a combined total of 4 goals against the Carolina Hurricanes, sweeping them. And the Hurricanes are a whole nother story. They've lost 12 straight conference final games dating back to 2006. So they're here. The Panthers beat the number 1 team in the regular season, the number 2 team in the regular season, and the number 4 team in the regular season. I know they have a date with the number 5 team in the regular season and the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup final. Big performers for the Florida Panthers they're numerous. They are a team that plays a lot like the Golden Knights play. They have a good amount of depth, especially on the forward core, and they've got high-end talent. And I'd be remiss, I've gotten, I don't know how many minutes into this video, and I haven't said Matthew Tkachuk, but I'm going to say Matthew Tkachuk a lot. Not as much as I said McDavid before the second round in that second round preview. I think I said it like 27 times in that video. But Matthew Tkachuk is a story in of itself, and he is just giant. He's just a huge part of the Florida Panthers. Them bringing him in at the start of this season was seen as a massive risk, trading off, Weegar and Huberdeau to Calgary in exchange for Tkachuk was seen as a really interesting move. And with like 2 weeks to go in the regular season, it was looking like the move wasn't going to pay off. And it took the Pittsburgh Penguins being an absolute idiot, losing to the Blackhawks and the Blue Jackets on consecutive nights, that even allowed the Panthers to be in this situation in the first place. And so really, the Panthers have to thank the Penguins for why they're able to play in the Stanley Cup Final. But anyway, back to Matthew Tkachuk. He's having himself a postseason. If there is a clutch goal to be scored, he's going to score it. He's scored so many overtime winners. I mean, he ended the Eastern Conference Final with 4 seconds to go in Game 4 on the power play. And we're not going to talk about the fact that the game should have never gotten, that game should have gone to overtime if the Hurricanes remembered how to play competent defense for 2 minutes. But again, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're talking about Matthew Tkachuk. He has transcended sport. He's like one of the top 3 scorers in the playoffs thus far. He's got some of the most game-winning goals. He's just playing a different kind of hockey right now, and that's something that the Golden Knights are going to have to be very wary of. Similar to Matthew Tkachuk is a resurgence of some kind. Now, everybody knows the goaltending story with the Florida Panthers. If you watch the Eastern Conference Final, the phrase, great save by Bobrovsky is just echoing around in your brain, but we have to remember he wasn't the starting goalie when this postseason began, and you're going to notice a couple of similarities to the Golden Knights' last trip to the Stanley Cup Final against the Washington Capitals. In both of those cases, the goalie that they face in the Stanley Cup Final is not the one that they started the playoff with. Lyon was the opening goalie for the Panthers. When they went down 3-1, they went to Bobrovsky as a last-ditch effort. He got lucked out in Game 5, and then he really slammed the door in Game 6 and in Game 7 overtime. And he's kind of taken the ball and ran with it. He's looked really solid. He looked really good against the Leafs. I think he gave up 2 goals or less in 9 straight games at some point between the second and third round. And ultimately, the most goals he gave up in a single game in the Eastern Conference Final was like 3. I believe it was in Game 1 or Game 4. And I guess you could say they finally started to get to him, because I know Game 4 was 4-3 for the Panthers. But Bobrovsky is on a whole nother level. He's playing like his $10 million contract entails. And so that has its own inherent risks. That has its own inherent whatever. Bobrovsky playing good can cause many problems. Obviously, it gave the Leafs fits, and it made the Hurricanes not even be able to win a singular game. So that's something that the Golden Knights are going to have to be very wary of. Having gone through equally pretty good goalies in Connor Hellebuyck and Jake Ottinger, and I'm leaving Stuart Skinner off the list because, well, you know why. The fact of the matter is that the Panthers deserve to be here. As much as they were the 17th best team in the regular season, they got in on the last day of the regular season, but they earned their spot. They got in, and then they beat the best team we'd ever seen, and then they beat the third best team, or the fourth best team, and then they beat the second best team. And now standing between them is 4 wins against the 5th best team. But the 5th best team was the best team in the Western Conference in the regular season. And all the way to now, the Golden Knights have been head and shoulders the class of the Western Conference. Obviously, I'm going to give them their own due diligence as I broke down the Panthers' run to the Stanley Cup Final. I'll break down our run to the Stanley Cup Final, or you could just check out my entire video logs of every single one of those games. Obviously, the Golden Knights were in the playoffs for the entire regular season. I can't remember a single day where the Golden Knights were outside of the playoff picture. Even when they were slipping back in December and I was pulling all of my collective hairs out, it was never really in doubt. It was just whether or not the Golden Knights would win the Pacific Division and the Western Conference in the regular season. Ultimately, with a late push, the Golden Knights were able to win the Pacific Division and lock up the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, which was good. That's the goal. But then they had to win 16 games in the postseason, which has always been a bit of a challenge. Getting out of the first round looked a little bit shaky as the Golden Knights dropped Game 1 against the Winnipeg Jets and then won 4 games in a row, and then managed to beat Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in 6. And I'm not going to say they beat the Oilers because that's not what the media said. the Golden Knights beat McDavid and Draisaitl. And Kane, he effed around, he found out, and now he's playing golf. And as of a couple of nights ago, the Golden Knights have just wrapped up another 6-game series against the Dallas Stars, claiming the Campbell Bowl as the Western Conference champion for 2023. Along the way, a couple of players really they've shined. They've been, to steal a phrase from our radio broadcast with Dan Duva, Gary Lawless, and everybody on the pregame, we've had various nights to shine this postseason. Obviously, one of them being the big question mark going into our postseason in goaltending. Laurent Brossoit won 5 games in a row across the first round and game 1 of the second round, but then got injured in game 3. And then Adin Hill picked up exactly where he left off, winning game 5 and game 6 against the Oilers, and then games 1, 2, and 3 against the Dallas Stars to make the Golden Knights the second team in NHL history to have 2 goalies win 5 games in a row in the same postseason. The last team to do it was the 1980 Philadelphia Flyers. And Adin Hill, despite looking a little shaky in game 5, looked amazing in stretches in game 4 and game 5 as well, being the reason the Golden Knights were able to hang on in a couple of those games, even though they lost. Ultimately, both Bobrovsky and Hill are entering the Stanley Cup final on relatively equal statistical playing fields, both giving up around 2 goals a game and both with a save percentage of around .930 something. This is like Marc-Andre Fleury, Jonathan Quick of the 2017-18 postseason round 1, where we wound up sweeping the LA Kings. Our goalie's playing good, their goalie's playing good. I'd say it's a bit of a wash. Another night to shine, though, obviously Jack Eichel, in his first career postseason, has been a game changer at times. I know he was held off the score sheet in the Western Conference Final, but he hit so many posts. He was all over the place, and he had what was probably the series-defining assist down 2-1 with 2 minutes to go in Game 2, stealing the puck from behind the net and feeding a no-look backhand pass to Jonathan Marchessault to knot the game up at 2, and the Golden Knights would go on to win that game in overtime. Eichel looked incredibly solid all postseason. The lights were never too bright for him, and even though he was held off the score sheet in the goal column, at least, in the Western Conference Final, he was still highly impactful. Same thing with Riley Smith, even though he's shined a little bit less. He played really good against the Edmonton Oilers, but also got held off the score sheet, especially in the goal column in the Western Conference Final. Really, the big talking point, the big player we have to talk about is William Karlsson. I know, what year is it? The guy scored 43 goals in 2017-18 regular season, and he scored 14 goals this season. He played all 82 games. He's one of the few players on the Golden Knights roster this season to play every game. 14 goals was a step back for him, but through 3 rounds, he's amassed 10. He has the most goals in a single postseason in Golden Knights history. His teammate, close friend Jonathan Marchessault is right behind him with 8, and so is Chandler Stevenson this year. So, William Karlsson has really elevated his game, not only on the offensive side, but on the defensive side. He was paired up against McDavid and Draisaitl. He was paired up against Hintz and Robertson and Pavelski this series. And it wouldn't shock me if his line is out there against Tkachuk for the majority of the Stanley Cup final. He's playing really good defense. He's played incredible 200-foot hockey. And he's finding a way to be in the right place at the right time to score big, huge, ginormous goals. Scoring the second goal and the fourth goal of game 6 against the Dallas Stars just to help ice the series, essentially. He's playing good, and obviously I mentioned Jonathan Marchessault. He's playing incredibly well as well. But the Golden Knights wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a more unsung group. And obviously I'm not talking about the defense because they are an incredibly revered unit, especially in this postseason, being the biggest and tallest and heaviest, and probably the most intimidating as opposed to the Panthers' less so intimidating defense. But I'm not going to beat that one too much because I didn't watch enough Panthers games to talk adequately about their defense, and I know our defense is going to play pretty okay. The biggest difference I think that can be made in this series to benefit the Golden Knights is depth. And to say that the Golden Knights have depth is like saying the sky is blue and the sun is hot and water is wet.
Actually, water isn't wet.
No. All you have to do is cast your mind back to Game 1 of the Western Conference Final in overtime, of all places. Who do you expect to score the OT winner in the Fortress in Game 1 of the Conference Final? It's Eichel, it's Stone, it's Pietrangelo, it's Brett Howden. And the depth has been unsung for most of this postseason. Like, Game 2, Chandler Stevenson scores the OT winner, but it was work done by Stone and Theodore, and Stevenson was down on the third line at the time. And the first overtime game the Golden Knights played, it was a double OT winner from Michael Amadio, of all people. And even in recent memory, Game 6, the weave play pulled off by Carrier and Colasar, which, as I said previously, if that was McDavid and Draisaitl, that's the goal of the century. That is just incredible instinct from incredibly talented players, and it's the fourth line, the identity line of a Golden Knights team that has rolled all four lines this entire year and every single game they've won this postseason. The depth is just astounding. Since Bruce Cassidy moved Nick Waugh down to the fourth line center, and I feel bad for Teddy Blueger because he got taken out of the lineup, and he was playing well, having scored a critical goal in Game 1 of the conference final to give the Golden Knights a 3-2 lead, and ultimately, as I mentioned prior, winning 4-3 in overtime. The depth is there. The depth scoring has been there from anybody who's been in the lineup. I believe it was in the conference final. Every single skater had a point, which is amazing. That is the epitome of depth scoring. And so I think the depth is going to be one of, if not the most critical factors in the Stanley Cup final. I know the Florida Panthers have depth, and I know that their depth is very talented. They wouldn't be in this situation if they weren't a deep team. But I just wonder, is their third line going to match up well to, Carlson, Smith, and Amadio? And is their fourth line going to hold up against Carrier, Colasar, and Waugh? Because if they can't hold that up, that creates mismatches up and down the lineup. And having the defensemen that we have being able to be enforcers and being able to activate into the play, and having Pietrangelo and Theodore. By the way, Shea Theodore had an incredible Game 6, and I wouldn't be shocked if he keeps that going into the Cup final. If they, on the back end, are able to get rolling, and the four lines for the Golden Knights forwards are able to get rolling, I know the Panthers can do it, and it's going to come down to if Bobrovsky can bail them out and if Tkachuk can bail them out. But if they start playing into mismatches, it could be a very interesting series very, very, very quickly. So obviously, with all the star power on the Golden Knights, Eichel, Stone, Pietrangelo, they're all going to play their part, and it wouldn't shock me if Eichel blows up and goes off for a bunch of points, given that he got held off pretty severely in the conference final. I can't help but think that the depth are going to be the biggest talking point in this series. And if Brett Howden gets going, if Mike Amadio gets going, if Carlson continues to be on this tear that he's on, that's going to create mismatches. I'm not going to say if the mismatches are going to be good or bad for the Golden Knights. I'm just going to say it will create mismatches. And now for the question you've all been waiting for. Will I attend a game? No, I won't. I tried so unbelievably hard to get tickets, but I did not get tickets. So I will not be going. Big sad. It's okay. I'll watch it on TV. I'll watch it from anywhere. I'll watch it from the trunk of a car stuck on the side of the highway. It's the Golden Knights' second trip to the Stanley Cup final, and really, this is the best chance with this core to get this far. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly exciting. And, aside from I saw somebody putting up their tickets in section 222, I believe it was, for $53,000 a piece. That's a little rich for my blood. No offense to whoever put those tickets up there. But ultimately, it's going to be an incredible series, and I don't know what to say. Between these two teams, between those two franchises, there is one singular Stanley Cup final win, and it's the Golden Knights Game 1 versus the Washington Capitals. I believe they won that game 5-4 on a Ryan Reeves game-winning goal, if I remember right. I was like 17 when that happened. And the last time the Panthers got to the Cup final, they got swept by the Colorado Avalanche. And so I'm sure they're looking to do some damage this time around. There's so many storylines, there's so many moving pieces, and with both teams being 4 wins away from the ultimate prize, I just don't know what to say other than this series is going to be interesting. It won't be short. I'm certain of that. I'm 100% certain this series will take 6 or 7 games to win. And Obviously, the homer in me wants to say the Golden Knights are going to win this 100%, but I don't know for sure. If Bobrovsky steals some games, it gets interesting. If Adin Hill somehow magically stops this incredible form, then it will be interesting. If Matthew Tkachuk transcends, it'll be interesting. If it's just the Panthers' year, who knows what'll happen. Ultimately, I'm going to lock in my prediction, same as the Western Conference Final. Golden Knights will win in 6, raise the Stanley Cup in a hostile building. But ultimately, only one team gets to win the last game of the year. I hope in my heart of hearts that it's our team, but I know it could be the other guys. The Panthers are the team of destiny this year. They've beaten so many good opponents. I just wonder what those 11 days off are going to do to Bobrovsky and the White Hot Panthers. So, again, my call, locking it in. Golden Knights in 6. Boy, that's going to be, if we get there, if we have the privilege of hoisting a heavy trophy that I swear and I've been told feels weightless when you've won it. If we have the honor and privilege to win that trophy in the next 2 weeks, oh, the sports world is not ready. No one's ready. It's us against the world again. I've seen the map. 49 states rooting for the Panthers. One rooting for the Golden Knights. Undermine us. Give us all the flack you want. Cap circumvention. What matters is we're here. We're 4 wins away from the ultimate prize. And I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to do it. That's all I've got. This is going to be fun.